Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. I am your host, Nicole Sienna, here with Canstar Resources President and CEO, JC Giron. Welcome.
Thanks, Nicole.
I'm going to be obviously hosting today. I'm going to take myself off the screen in just a second, but a few little housekeeping items here. For those of you joining us live on the webinar today, there is a chat function to the right of your screen. Go ahead and plug in any questions you have for JC. We will get to them at the end of the presentation. Outside of that, if you are watching on the replay, you can always contact JC directly. There will be a contact page up on the screen at some point today. We can take all those questions after the live. So I'll hand it over to you and come back in a few minutes.
So I appreciate everyone joining today. We're really excited to discuss Canstar Resources. Canstar Resources is a TSXV listed mineral exploration company and mining company that's focused on transforming overlooked mineral systems into strategic assets for the coming commodity supercycle. And I'll begin here with just a bit of an overview of the company and our team and our strategy, and then I'll touch on our exploration portfolio, which is currently based in Newfoundland. You can see a picture of St. John there and on our slide deck cover, and then I'll look forward to engaging with the audience on any questions. A couple of basic disclosures here that'll be available on the deck and on the website. So a quick overview of Canstar Resources. So I think it's important to begin really with the global macro context. I'm a big believer in commodity supercycles, and I think right now we're seeing really the perfect storm for a major rotation of capital back into the mining sector. There are a number of independent factors that are driving this. Obviously, front and center of that is the dynamic around the West's push for the diversification of critical mineral supply chains. We know, and obviously we've seen right now in the geopolitical context, that there's a major push right now to not necessarily completely decouple from China, for the West to decouple from China, but absolutely for the West to have greater control over critical mineral supply chains. We got involved in this space because we were a big believer that this was going to be one of the major drivers of the global economy over the next decade or so. And I think we're seeing that accelerate, obviously, in some very important ways. I think, when you think about that picture there you see of antimony prices, it's sort of a great example of the kind of dynamic I think we're going to be seeing. Not only are you going to see continued subsidization of mineral projects in the West by governments, and you've seen that, obviously sort of most famously, Lithium Americas project receiving a $2.6 billion line of credit from the Department of Energy. You saw the gold antimony project in Idaho, the Stibnite mine, they receive $1 billion line of credit from the Export-Import Bank. So you're seeing this dynamic. You're also seeing for the first time the United States Department of Defense beginning to invest directly into Canadian projects. And so some really exciting dynamics around that. I think one of the other features of this landscape is you're going to continue to see major pricing dislocations that I think will reward people that are strategically positioned in the most attractive commodities. So the graph there sort of showing, antimony, a key mineral. It's very important for military applications, particularly when you think about, night vision, high-end displays, body armor, armor-piercing ammunition, and so on. And, obviously China has dominated the supply chain for antimony and continues to do so. Although it is interesting to note that our gold antimony project in Newfoundland is only 90 kilometers from what was at one time the only producing antimony mine in North America. But I think there's a perfect example of the kind of dynamic that we're going to see with commodity prices where, because of the trade tensions between China and the United States, you see, basically a scaling back of antimony exports to the West by China. And antimony prices surged last year from around $14,000 a ton to over $30,000 a ton. I'll just touch real quick on a few other major drivers here of the geopolitical picture, and I think the coming commodity supercycle. It's important to note that there are multiple drivers here. I think a lot of talk has been. We've heard a lot of talk about the energy transition, and that's certainly a factor that's going to, majorly impact global commodity markets, but it's much, much deeper than just the energy transition. I think, the defense industrial base, which is the graph here, the second from the left that we see, the massive surge in NATO spending. This is an organization, an alliance that was spending, $900 billion, $800 billion on defense and defense infrastructure a few years ago. It's now spent over 1.4 trillion critically. As of last year, for the first time ever, from a base of about 14%, we saw over 30% of expenditures go into major capex items. And so I think that's a dynamic that's only going to accelerate, particularly when you look at the dynamics between Europe and the United States, and sort of the recognition that Europe and others are sort of making that increasingly they're going to have to produce more of their own equipment. And so another major dynamic that I think is we've all seen, and it's been really incredible to see the run in gold prices, and that's in my opinion a dynamic that's here to stay. One thing I think is clear about the current administration, which is just getting going in the United States, is that it is an administration that is not at all scared of deficit spending. I think inflation, we've seen that it's sticky. It's going to continue to be sticky. We're seeing de-dollarization and an erosion in sort of, obviously the dollar. I mean, I certainly don't think there's going to be a change in the status of the dollar as the global reserve currency, but I certainly think that, we're going to continue to see a dynamic where global central banks, notably the Chinese central banks and central banks in the global south, are going to be purchasing more gold and less treasuries. And the reality is, as we've seen with record high gold prices, you don't need a tremendous move, a tremendous shift to dramatically impact commodity markets. So the other big factor there that's obviously driving gold price is the safe haven. I mean, if there's one term I think that effectively describes the current geopolitical situation, it's uncertainty. And so I think that's going to continue to be excellent for gold prices going forward. So I wanted to touch on that, and we can certainly discuss that a bit more, but I think we are in a very special and very exciting geopolitical environment. And I think it's going to be very important for companies like Canstar that are positioned in the right commodities. So a little bit about Canstar. I joined as CEO in January of 2024. I joined with my colleague, our CFO, Will Upshur. And really, we found Canstar after about a 9-month search, and we were backed by a large family office out of Atlanta, Georgia. And really, I think when you kind of see the way that we got involved with Canstar and the way that our strategy came together, it's because we have a very high conviction when it comes to critical minerals and critical materials, to include gold, I would add in that list, for its criticality as an investment and an asset class. But yeah, we had very high conviction, and we believed that the best way to execute on this conviction was to identify an opportunity that we thought was undervalued and represented a really attractive entry point for us, and also had an amazing asset base and an amazing team that we could really build with and grow with. And so we spent about 9 months in searching for everything from cold calling to obviously reaching out to industry contacts and identifying potential opportunities for us to build on. And we found Canstar actually by way of an introduction through Altius Minerals, which is one of the largest investors in Canstar. We're close with Altius Minerals. They're a fantastic group. I'm sure many of you are familiar with them. Newfoundland-based, outstanding technical team. Lawrence Winter, Dr. Lawrence Winter is vice president at Altius and is actually a member of our advisory board and a close advisor and mentor for us. So we were introduced to Canstar through Altius, and we immediately fell in love with the people and the quality and the jurisdiction. It's important to discuss the jurisdiction because, as most of you, if not all of you, know, jurisdiction's everything when it comes to these projects. I was speaking with an individual in a pretty good jurisdiction just the other day, an exploration manager for a major, and he was talking about how they were unable to get any trenching permits in the jurisdiction that they were in, and there's a totally different dynamic with Newfoundland, where you can see drill permits in 6 to 8 weeks, trenching permits in significantly shorter time frame than that. You have a very accommodative environment. You have excellent infrastructure on the island, and you have a highly skilled group of individuals that live there that are familiar with mining, that want mining in the community, and they can contribute to an expansion of work programs there. We also loved the fact that Canstar had, we think, kind of the perfect mix of projects. In addition to the Golden Bay project, which was, prior to my joining the company, the flagship project of the company, very high grade gold, very high grade antimony, district scale project, a very compelling project that actually was the project that caused Eric Sprott to get involved with the company, and he's still a major shareholder of the company. But in addition to that, there were the VMS assets in the Buckans district in Newfoundland. And, we actually, Will and I both, in a previous life, had worked in this district on VMS projects, and we were familiar with the Buckans projects, which really are, it's a remarkable district when it comes to VMS. VMS, obviously, polymetallic. I think that provides a really interesting opportunity in this current environment, where you get that interesting sort of mix of base metals and precious metals. But Buckans in particular is known for basically having the highest grade VMS system that's ever been mined. Over 20% metal content by volume, base metal content by volume. I believe the 5 Buckans deposits that were mined by Osisko generated 750,000 ounces of gold over that 60-year period where those deposits were mined. So, very special district. In the past, because Golden Bay had been the flagship project of Canstar, and obviously it generated a lot of excitement, these VMS assets really hadn't received the same level of investment, and so we thought that was going to be an excellent opportunity. So look, at a very high level, and I'll kind of get into the project portfolio. I want to make sure that I leave enough time for Q&A. I joined in 2024, and for us, and this chart here kind of shows, I think visually what we've been doing. It's really been building a foundation, and a foundation that we believe, can deliver strong value to shareholders. And we think this is a very exciting time for the company. You can see, obviously, we've had a bit of an uptick in the market price of the stock and the market capitalization of the stock since we got involved with Canstar. We brought on 2 new board members. I'll touch on them here in a second, and built out the team a bit, and then obviously the recent news that we've announced, we're very excited about. We think this is a cornerstone in our strategy going forward, which is the strategic exploration joint venture with VMS Mining Corporation. VMS Mining Corporation, just to touch on them quickly, this is a private organization that was founded by a number of the key figures behind the Osisko group of companies, as well as Aurelian and Dalradian Resources. This is a group that has over $4 billion in acquisition value generated over the last 8 years. So tremendous track record, some of the most exciting discoveries and some of the biggest successes in this space over the last several years. And they brought in Dr. Harold Gibson, who's really, absolutely a top individual in the world when it comes to VMS mineralization. I'll just add real quick. Obviously, being a technical business, that technical expertise is so important. So we're super excited to be working with Dr. Harold Gibson and VMS on advancing these VMS assets, and looking for another Buckans grade discovery there in the district. We've got an aggressive cadence. We've just announced, as we're working on finalizing the definitive agreements, and we've already announced the LOI. We've just announced that we've already received the first $500,000 from VMS Mining to make sure that we can keep this aggressive cadence going on the exploration work there. So super exciting opportunity for us. And I'll also point out, and I think lots of companies can say that they're undervalued. Certainly, we believe that we're undervalued, but we also believe that value, we're going to see sort of the market value converge with the intrinsic value of the company. But it's important to note that the phase 1 investment from VMS Mining Corporation values just the Buckans and Marion March assets at a $15 million pre-money valuation. So that's double our market cap, I think, just demonstrating and indicating that this is a really exciting time for the company, and certainly that there's a tremendous amount of intrinsic value that we believe is going to be recognized as we begin to sort of tell the story. I touched on the team a little bit. I won't spend too much more time there, other than just to say that I think we do have a team that is very different than any team that you'll see with any other junior. I challenge people to take a look at our peers and look at our competitors. We've got a really interesting mix of some top tier mining individuals with excellent technical expertise, but also a really nice mix of Fortune 500 executives, venture capital investors, as well as if you look at our advisory board, national security experts and geopolitics experts. And I think that's been one of the things that's been, I'll just touch on real quick on our advisory board, just to emphasize that a little bit. One of the things that really demonstrates how we are built differently and built to succeed in this next era of mining. We announced last year the latest addition to our advisory board, Lieutenant Colonel Dr. David Kilcullen, world-renowned geostrategist, is commonly advising top government officials around the world. Was a senior advisor to General Petraeus and Condoleezza Rice. And was chief strategy officer, for the Office of Counterinsurgency for the U.S. State Department. So really, really exciting team. And again, I think just speaking to the foundation that we've built here, that we think we're really at an inflection point. I touched on the jurisdiction, so I won't spend too much time on that. I'll just give an overview here of our project portfolio, and then we can turn it back over to Nicole and get into the Q&A, where I think we'll have an interesting dialogue. But as I said, that what drew us to Canstar was really the jurisdiction, the team, and the project portfolio. Canstar has 3 exploration projects right now in Newfoundland. We have the Golden Bay project, obviously, that's been the flagship project for the company. That is a very interesting project, over 400 bedrock samples grading over 1 gram per ton gold, over 100 grading over 10 grams per ton. This is a 540 kilometer squared project, most of it contiguous, 90 kilometers of strike on the Dayco thrust. So, it's an amazing geological setting. It's a geological setting that we've seen, be very successful with our neighbors in Newfound Gold that just announced, I believe, a $60 million financing with another $20 million from Eric Sprott, and obviously the Valentine Lake gold mine, which again, same structural setting there. You have a 5 billion ounce deposit, I think, that has a ton of room to grow, and is aiming to pour gold in the third quarter of this year. But in addition to those projects, we have the 2 VMS projects that we're working to advance, and those I think are very exciting. It's the Buckans Project and the Mary March Project. These are 2 high-grade VMS projects in the heart of the Buckans district. The Buckans Project, and I'll just transition to that now, is located right in the heart of the Buckans district, as the name implies. And again, this was the highest grade VMS system of all time. There was 5 deposits that were mined by Osisko. You can see here, and I'll just turn on the whiteboard feature here. And let's see. Okay, I think you can kind of see this here. So it's, so the deposits that were mined by Osisko, you can see our property boundaries here, were essentially, essentially immediately adjacent to these 5 deposits that were mined by Osisko. What's interesting about the Buckans Project as well, and I'll just clear these comments here. You can see these these red colored areas on the map. Those represent major multi-kilometer anomalies that were discovered in a 2017 SkyTem survey. These anomalies are untested. I'll just show you a quick cross-section here of the largest area of anomalism that we see on the project. And basically what we're doing here is exploring the down-dip extension of the Buckans mine. We think that the Buckans River Formation, the host geological unit for all 5 of the Osisko deposits, underlies the entirety of the property. And so, when you look at the geological modeling, you look at the geological setting, we all know that the best place to find a new deposit is in the shadow of the head frame, basically in the area where old deposits have been successfully mined and discovered. And you see this kind of anomalism, you start to get really excited. And certainly that's one of the things that's been exciting to us. This cross-section here shows, it's basically the cross-section of the multi-kilometer 2017 SkyTem anomaly. What's interesting about it is you can see that the old timers that were drilling there without the benefit of modern geophysics essentially missed entirely that area of anomalism. Now, that red drill trace that I have there is a drill trace from the 1970s that does appear to have intersected the area of anomalism. It's an old drill log, but we did note that there's, in the log, it mentions over 100 meters of intense alteration. So again, a lot of indicators here for very fruitful exploration. We currently have a deep IP geophysics program that's actually a joint program with Canstar Minerals. That's our neighbor in the Buckans district. They've had some excellent success drilling there, some very high grade, and I believe over 100-meter intercept that they announced last year with some of their preliminary drill programs in the area. So a super exciting area to be involved in. And I think this deep IP survey that we're doing, when you think about it, sort of overlaying with the 2017 SkyTem survey, providing us with some really compelling targets that obviously the next step would be drill testing and interrogating those targets to see what we can find down there. The Mary March Project, I'll touch on this quick. I think this is a very exciting project. The highest grades ever found in the Buckans district outside of, the Buckans camp proper, come out of the Mary March Project. This is a project, and I'll flip to the next slide here and then come back to this one, that you can see here these hatch marked areas on the left that shows you the scale of the alteration zone in the Buckans district. Here on the right, you can see in the green area the scale of the alteration zone at the Mary March Project. These maps are drawn to scale, so major alteration zone, and some very exciting discoveries with very little exploration to date. There really hasn't been comprehensive high-resolution airborne geophysics there. That's one of the things that we're going to be undertaking in the near term at that project. But you do see some very interesting geochemical signatures, and I think most notably there's a discovery hole there. This was a discovery hole that was over 10 meters of massive sulfides, or approximately 10 meters of massive sulfide, grading about 17% base metal content by volume. So very high grade, again, kind of that Buckans grade discovery. but it also had 4 grams per ton gold and 122 grams per ton silver. So super exciting project, super underexplored. And, I think from our standpoint, being able to work closely with Dr. Harold Gibson, who's, truly a world-class expert when it comes to these kinds of deposits, we just think that we're primed for some very exciting potential discoveries in this district. So, I think with that, given that we've taken a little bit of time here, and I have talked about the Golden Bay project a bit, I'll turn it back over to Nicole, and I can pull these slides back up if there's a need to go into any of the technical details there, but we can pivot over to the Q&A and begin that dialogue.
Perfect. Yes, we will pull up some of those slides again. We have some questions I think will lend well to that. Just a reminder, the chat function is open on your screen, folks, so get your questions in, we'll get to them. JC, I want to just acknowledge you've been CEO since the beginning of 2024, so you're coming into this with fresh eyes. Past management prioritized Golden Bay over the other projects. I just want to talk a little bit about what made you shift your focus from Golden Bay as flagship to the Buckans and Mary March, and maybe even what drew you to these projects originally, because you say that is what drew you to Canstar.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I said, I had the opportunity to work and be involved in the Buckans district in the past. So it was one of the things that drew us to Canstar, is that we knew that there were these VMS assets that hadn't been the focus of the company, and we thought that there was a lot of untapped potential there. I should say about the Golden Bay project, we're not de-emphasizing it. We're not moving away from it. We think it's an amazing project. And really my objective would be to do a similar deal, that we did with VMS mining on the VMS assets to advance the Golden Bay project. So it's really kind of taking that strategic exploration approach, a little bit of a portfolio driven approach. One thing about the Golden Bay project I should emphasize that we've spent a bit more time focusing on is the antimony potential there. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, about 90 kilometers from the Le Pouvoir prospect area of our Golden Bay project, you have the Beaverbrook antimony mine, which was for a time the only producing antimony mine in North America. Very high grade antimony potential there. So there's a lot of potential at Golden Bay. I think with gold prices where they are and antimony prices where they are, I think we're going to be very well positioned to do an attractive strategic exploration joint venture there. But absolutely, the VMS projects for us are super exciting, and I think it really begins with the opportunity to work with an expert like Harold Gibson. I think when you have that kind of world-class expertise and track record, you always get super excited. And VMS we think is kind of the perfect mineralization style for where we are in the world right now. You have obviously the opportunity for very high grades there in Buckans, and you also have the opportunity for tweaking your metallurgy to sort of emphasize one commodity versus another with that polymetallic nature, the sort of the mix of critical and precious metals. We think it's a really great kind of mineral system to be involved with.
Right. You have critical and base metals with the Buckans and Mary March projects. You have gold with Golden Bay. So you are covering a lot of ground with what you have there in your portfolio. So I do want to focus a little bit on the JVs that you have. You have VMS mining with Mary March and Buckans. You also have Glencore JV on Mary March. What can investors expect long term? Are we looking to be a takeover target? Are we looking to consolidate in the space? What's our mentality behind this? And you're obviously coming to this from a unique perspective of having the mining, finance, and strategy background. So what's your thinking behind these moves?
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, I think ultimately, every sort of, smaller mining company is looking for an opportunity to be acquired. And I think the way that you do that is by reaching value accretive milestones through, in this case, strategic exploration. The joint venture with VMS mining is really important. I should address the joint venture with Glencore there as well. This joint venture is transitioning from a joint venture with Glencore, which is a historic joint venture, to a joint venture that's an active strategic exploration joint venture with VMS Mining Corporation. This joint venture, though, I should emphasize, the structure of the joint venture is really attractive for us. Not only do we get a lot of capital going into the ground, so $11.5 million, that $11.5 million buys VMSC 60% of the project. And so that leaves us with 40% and the right to continue investing at that 40% pro rata, which is great. It means that, as the project is de-risked, as we advance into drilling at the project, that we're going to have an opportunity to maintain a position in what we think could be a very attractive asset base for us.
Right. And you're still exploring, right? We're still in such early stages. And so, the world is pivoting towards national security clean energy, technological sovereignty. There's so much in the news right now, and you guys are really redefining exploration with the use of AI. So we haven't gone into it too much through your deck so far, but you are using AI, you are using deep IP, which is basically an MRI of the Earth. It's a very cool thing that hopefully we can touch on in a second. But have those tools led to any specific drill targets or any early findings that you're particularly excited about right now, or are we still too early to kind of get into that too much?
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I think first and foremost, I want to say that I really hope anyone that's participating in this call and is sort of maybe newer to the story that they continue to follow us. I think, a big focus for us is transparency. We're happy to answer questions at any point in time. And of course, as we develop targets from the exploration work that's going on, we'll be more than happy to, present these targets to our investor base and to those that are interested. The Deep IP program was just launched in January. It's still underway. This is a major program. It's a ground-based program for those who aren't familiar with deep IP. So you're literally, you have individuals that are out there putting receivers into the ground, running charges deep into the earth. This is a program that's been optimized for us for, penetrating at very significant depths. We're seeing, good resolution right now with preliminary data out to about 750 meters. So it's a little bit early for us to get into the targets that are being generated from this program. On the AI, there's nothing that we've announced yet. I will say that it is a big focus for us. There's no question that geologists and field science is going to continue to be important. But I think when you think about exploration, fundamentally what it is about acquiring and interpreting data sets. And these are very vast data sets that are also fundamentally different in nature. So you have, geochemical data, geophysical data, there's structural data, and all of these data sets, if you can fuse them together and derive, enhanced insights through that fusion of data. And if you can undertake, advanced probabilistic modeling when it comes to target generation, I absolutely think it can give you a big leg up. So I would encourage people to stay tuned. Again, we haven't announced anything yet on the AI side, but I definitely think that there's the potential in the near future for some exciting partnership announcements.
It really is AI meets geology in, a world of, mining that is not always the most technologically advanced when we're talking about new age tech like AI. Do you think that this machine learning, this data integration, even predictive modeling is going to help the balance sheet once you can get a drill in the ground and once you're starting to do more active work?
Oh, there's no question about it. I mean, I think at the end of the day, look, I mean, it's for those of us who, and I'll certainly say I'm an AI convert. There's no such thing as a silver bullet in the world, but when you look at the speed at which these, which these systems are developing, I mean, it's absolutely tremendous. And I think, as a company, as an organization, if you're not putting yourself at the forefront of those developments, I just think you're going to fall behind. And when it comes to, the impact on the company from an ROI standpoint, I mean, look, exploration is all about optimization. It's all about increasing your chances of success, decreasing your cost of success. And so when you think about, enhanced insights from the data fusion, when you think about the probabilistic modeling that can, potentially reduce the amount of investment that you need to make to interrogate a target effectively and to identify attractive targets, then yeah, I think it can absolutely have a big impact on the company, and something that we're absolutely excited about and continuing to invest our time in.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting, something that I'm going to keep a pulse on for sure. I do want to go a little bit bigger picture here for a quick second. We're talking about Canada and NATO's critical mineral strategy. You mentioned a $1.4 trillion price tag earlier in your deck. Is there active government interest in what you guys are doing right now, or what are you seeing in support behind the scenes?
Absolutely, yeah. So look, I mean, I think when it comes to, government support for these projects, I think there's a number of different ways in which governments and at the local level and at the national level can support these projects, right? Part of it comes with, improved permitting timelines. I think, we're already in an amazing jurisdiction for that. When it comes to actually capital investment into these projects, that typically happens at a later stage. That typically happens once you've sort of made that discovery, once you've defined a resource. But I think when you look at the kinds of projects that we're positioned in, and I think the Stibnite mine in Idaho is a great example, gold and antimony, rapid permitting, major investment from the government. And I mentioned earlier, we're seeing for the first time last year, the Department of Defense, the Department of Energy actually investing not only in US projects, but Canadian projects. And when you think about the way that we've built with, the recent board member that we announced, Nyla Beth Gabel, former executive at Booz Allen Hamilton, kind of the top management consulting firm for the US public sector, my CFO, Will, his background, also at Booz Allen Hamilton, but in national security, did his master's at Johns Hopkins, was in counterinsurgency for a while. David Kilcullen joining the board. I think you see how we're positioning ourselves as we advance these projects to be in a position to receive that support as we go forward.
You'd mentioned some of your team members there. You folks earlier this year did announce some pretty substantial upgrades, or not upgrades, but changes to your board. Can you talk a little bit about that? What drew these people in? What made you want them to join?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it really starts with adding J. Paul Austin III. So his grandfather is one of the most famous executives in American history. He built Coca-Cola into a household name, took them from 600 million in sales to 6 billion in sales. J. Paul's, an amazing strategic and financial mind, has been involved in quantitative finance, began his career at Goldman Sachs, has been involved in venture capital. I think it really, bringing him on board and him supporting us, and, he's been very active in the market. All that's public information, obviously. His purchases in the market, as well as his participations in the financings that we've announced. But yeah, I think when you think about, someone like him joining the board and investing not only his capital, but his time and energy in advancing the strategy, I think it really speaks to what we think is a huge opportunity for Canstar, and something that I think, we've already demonstrated our ability to execute on, and something we're going to continue to emphasize, which is, marrying the best of, the Canadian mining sector, the technical expertise there, the projects there, with U.S. capital markets. And so I think that's something that's going to continue to accelerate. Obviously, we also announced as a member of the board, Nyla Beth Gabel. I touched on her just a little bit, but again, I think it's just speaking to how we're building differently. We want the best of the mining, but we also want sort of the best of outside of mining. We want, that Fortune 500 expertise. We want the venture capital, private equity expertise, because the reality is, and I think when you look at the terms of this joint venture that we announced, part of that is being informed from different perspectives, And so I think when you have that successful marriage, the best of mining, the best of outside of mining, I think really great things can happen. And I definitely think that, I think we've got great projects, and this joint venture is super exciting, but I think our team is definitely our biggest asset.
And you mentioned before that's so important in a team, and you mentioned your group is different than a lot of other mining companies. These additions are, I think, demonstrating how your board is showing the confidence in the direction of Canstar in general. Can you speak a little bit to the insider ownership and even your cap structure that you currently have?
Absolutely, yeah. And I can flip back into some of that specifically. I'll just at a high level, I'll say that, right now, Eric Sprott and Altius Minerals continue to be major shareholders of the company. Obviously, we brought in some new investors. I mentioned J. Paul already. When it comes to support from our investor base, though, I think probably the two best data sets are the fact that, we did this initial financing in January of 2024. We almost kind of looked at it as a sort of a seed stage investment. From that financing, we issued some warrants. We've seen 12.2 million of those warrants be exercised to date. So I think that's really speaking to, the investors that came in, really doubling down on the investment. And, when it comes to J. Paul, and again, I think all of this it's all, publicly identified in his filings. In addition to participating in the financing, he's purchased, almost 5 million shares in the open market. So very strong support. I think, again, I couldn't be, more excited for the team that we have. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be the reason that we're going to be successful.
Now, hopefully on the line, we have existing shareholders, hopefully some people that we can get more interested in your name. If you look at the stock chart, the stock has seen some periods of consolidation. So what would you say to those investors who are watching from the sidelines, and even those who are wondering where that momentum is or when it's going to return?
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, you can get a little bit too much involved in trying to read the tea leaves here. The bottom line is, I think we're way undervalued. We have an amazing platform, an amazing team, outstanding projects, and an excellent jurisdiction. We just had a major strategic investor get involved and basically peg just the 2 VMS projects that we have, never mind the gold antimony project, at a value double our market cap. So, I think people are interested. It's time to get in. I think we're poised to deliver. I personally believe there's multiples and multiples of potential here. So yeah, I would say for people that are interested, the best way to get involved is to get involved. Participate in acquiring shares in the market, get involved, reach out, engage with our management team. Like I said, we're very transparent and happy to engage with anyone that's interested. And I think, we're really at an inflection point. And certainly I think, this webinar is also demonstrating this is really the first one that we've done. And that's kind of by design in a way, right? We spent the last year building a foundation that we think is investable and exciting. And now that we have that, I think we're going to see, as we draw more attention to the story, I think we're going to see that be reflected in our market capitalization. So yeah, I would encourage people to get involved. And like I said, feel free to reach out at any time and pose questions and engage with us. That's what we love to do.
I do like having a little bit of a forward-looking question here. Are you looking to expand beyond the Buckans Project, Golden Bay, or are you just all in proving these with value right now?
No, absolutely. We're looking to continue to grow. I think the best way to describe it is sort of having, organic growth and then strategic growth. So organic growth is really developing the projects that we have. With this VMS joint venture, I think we're poised for some very exciting potential there. Obviously the upside from that could be tremendous, and a company builder in and of itself. I think the Golden Bay gold antimony project, with gold prices the way they are and antimony prices the way they are, we're in some conversations, and I think there's going to be an opportunity to do a similar kind of a deal there. And then, when you think about strategic growth going forward, it's absolutely about identifying, new projects that have high leverage to the commodities that we want exposure to. And we do have a pipeline of projects that we're evaluating. And, I'll add, and this kind of dovetails with your last question, I think, certainly investors that have been involved in this space, some of them have been a bit long suffering. It's been a tough time in the mining sector in the last few years. But, from my standpoint, I think that's actually something that we view as a huge opportunity, because as we continue to advance these projects and as we look at the strategic growth opportunities, I think we're going to be able to acquire some undervalued, overlooked mineral systems, mineral projects, if you will, and turn them into, really compelling strategic assets. So, it's kind of Warren Buffett's old, which I guess kind of dovetails back with your last question as well, but it's, Warren Buffett's kind of famous, maybe apocryphal quote that, the best time to be greedy is when people are fearful. And so I think that the fact that the sector is still a bit disfavored represents a huge opportunity for us as a company that's focused on executing, and for investors that are looking for an opportunity for really big upside.
We didn't talk too much about, we know where the projects are, but how exactly you're getting there. And this isn't an exploration program in the middle of nowhere, right? It is adjacent to one of the most legendary mines in history. So can you just spend 30 seconds or so, what makes this so special? How are you getting, and also the difference between the two projects you do have, they're on different ends of the island there. So just talk a little bit about that.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, look, the Buckans Project absolutely is situated with excellent access to infrastructure. The town of Buckans and the town of Millertown are right near the projects there. There's major roadways that pass right through and by those projects. Newfoundland, for those who haven't had the opportunity to go, I highly recommend that. I was there 4 times last year. It's a beautiful island with probably the nicest people that I ever met. I think one thing that really stands out is the importance that mining has had on the island. And I think when you talk to senior political officials there, senior regulatory officials there, I mean, this is a place that's open for business, and it's a place that is I think actively seeking investment and welcomes the kinds of investments that we're making on the island. And so from an infrastructure standpoint, from a social license standpoint, I think it's about as good as it gets. I'll also say, the Golden Bay project kind of being sort of towards the southern part of the island is also, there's massive parts of the projects that are right near, major highways on the island. And there's also, great access through old logging roads and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's interesting in that it's underexplored, but situated next to, a lot of excellent infrastructure, and certainly things that we think make the project, I think the concept we use internally is ease of exploration. The ease of exploration is very high there.
Right. And hopefully that translates to more news this year. Are there any catalysts or any little nuggets you can give us to look out for as we kind of approach the second half of the year?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think people need to stay tuned. I definitely, just to kind of, frame this in the big picture, right? And I'm not one that's big on sort of, forward-looking statements and so on. I think our results have to speak for themselves, but I absolutely think that we're poised to generate substantial news flow in the near term. Both with the aggressive cadence of exploration that's now underway at Berry March, as well as coming up towards wrapping up the geophysics program at Buckans. I think there's certainly going to be some interesting news there. And then I mentioned sort of the opportunity for partnerships in the near term that I think will also be very exciting. So yeah, I think again we've been kind of building the foundation, and now is really the period of time where we're sort of telling our story and executing and sort of accelerating the pace of our activities. And so I think there's going to be a lot of momentum this year and a lot of news, and we definitely encourage people to stay tuned and to follow us on social media, where also we'll be aiming to do more content like this on a regular basis, so that we can kind of get the story out and engage with people as they have questions.
Well, that's great. It's we're at the end of our webinar today. If you have any final thoughts, all questions from the audience have come in, so I'll leave the final word with you.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think I'll just go back to your earlier question. For people that are interested, when's the time? I think now's the time. I think that this is an inflection point for the company. I think there's some very exciting news in store, and again, happy to engage with people whenever they're interested. I think it's one of the benefits of being a small company is we have that capacity and that bandwidth. So appreciate you hosting us for this webinar. It's been exciting to tell our story a bit, and look forward to more.
Yeah, it's been really exciting learning more about Canstar. I will encourage everyone to head to your website. The contact page is open. Go ahead and ask your questions and get in touch with JC directly. This will be a replay as well. So if you are not watching live, check out the replay on their website or on YouTube. And that's it for today. We'll hopefully host you again soon.